In finance, fundamentally, we are responsible for not ending up bankrupt. In the same way that we're planning and focusing daily on a retirement plan, we should also be confident that we're going to be healthy enough to enjoy it. And why are those not treated similarly? You get your blood panel at your checkup, and that gives you a number, triglycerides, 105. Your triglycerides will double after a meal. We are literally a wet chemistry set. We are putting chemicals in, and new chemicals have to be synthesized to address those chemicals, break them down, make them into new chemicals, and that's happening constantly. Not only are people not connected with anything about their internal health state and the numbers that define it, but the numbers they are familiar with are not useful.
Josh, thanks for joining me, man.
Super excited to be here, Brett.
Dude, I'm so pumped. I think we first met at the Arena Hall event, which was great. It was a little panel on metabolic health. That's how you and I got to meet. And then we ran into each other at the Collective, where a lot of good conversations and connections happen.
Of course.
And we've, we've been a huge fan of what you guys are doing at Levels for a really long time, and have personally wanted to have you on the show. So appreciate you doing this. And I think there's a lot of good stuff that we're going to dig into today.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm excited to be in the same city and able to do these sorts of things live and in person.
Dude, the in-person connections of being in Austin, particularly in the health and wellness space, is unbelievable. I don't think there's another city that's like it.
It's what I was hoping for when coming here, and I have not been disappointed.
Seriously. It's like a health and wellness renaissance almost, for lack of a better term.
There you go. I love that term.
Yeah.
I also hope to see it become like a bit of a new industrial revolution too. I mean, there's a lot of technology. I hope to see more deep tech coming here, and just like creators.
Definitely. Yeah, man, Harry and I were really pumped to sit down and talk with you, because we are huge fans of what you guys are doing at Levels. Really like revolutionizing the metabolic health space, I would say, and CGMs, continuous glucose monitors. We've both had amazing experiences with them. It taught me a ton about just like my relationship with food, what carbs was I responsive to, what carbohydrates did not sit well in my stomach at all. So having people like you out there that are really trying to push this mission forward and make CGM super accessible for people, really fun, really enjoyable. I mean, I think the work that you guys are doing is so valuable. But I also know that you had a very interesting experience with your own health that actually led you to build this company. And I think that people's health journeys and their own personal experiences are very relatable, because I think it shows that you kind of took this negative situation and it ended up turning out to be this ultimate blessing, because it led to you starting this business. But I think that would be a great starting point to dig into the conversation. Is tell us a little bit where you were prior to 2019 starting Levels.
Yeah, it's somehow it's been 5 years, but
it's amazing.
It goes a few years prior to that, where, growing up, I was into sports. I was always relatively healthy from the outside looking in, and really enjoyed being active. When I played a bunch of sports, played club rugby in school, played ice hockey, played lacrosse, all the stuff, stayed active. And then getting out and being a professional was kind of an adjustment, because there isn't really that outlet built in.
Yeah.
So I started getting into CrossFit and found a lot of like competitive, sort of fitness-driven motivation there. I've done some bodybuilding stuff, and overall just have really enjoyed, I should say I've really relied on having physical fitness as an outlet and a means of keeping me mentally healthy as well. And so I've just always had that, even if I wasn't intentionally pursuing it for that reason. But along the way, I had no real grounding. So I was not educated in metabolic health, metabolic sciences, medicine in any way. And so I was doing it for the competitive benefit and all of that. But I picked up a lot of hacks and sort of gym science that I really relied on. So carb loading, hearing those words, say no more. For me, I am somebody with a sweet tooth that runs from head to toe. And I just kind of developed a real a nutritional philosophy that was all calories are the same. It's, Skittles, broccoli, same, just different quantities.
Yeah.
And I really, that was music to my ears to hear that, because I loved all types of sweet, savory foods. And so I had absolutely no nutritional guidelines or boundaries growing up. And I didn't gain weight. I was, again, very active. So I wasn't gaining weight. There was no outside indicator that anything was going wrong.
Yeah. And
in fact, the palatability, like the delicious feedback I'm getting from my body is that this is exceptionally high quality calories.
Definitely.
Right? Lean in. I'm somebody who would eat candy for dinner, literally, in college.
Are you serious? Yeah.
No joke. Like, you can ask my roommates, would eat candy for dinner numerous times a week. I mean, obviously that's crazy, but I had late labs, and I'd come home and I'd just crush like a bag from the C-store that was nearby. And that didn't carry any consequences for me until I got to a certain age. And when I was working at SpaceX, in the engineering world, or at least in that company in particular, it is highly competitive. Like, people are working to outperform each other inside of the same organization, and so it adds like stress on top of the tradition, just the standard stress of being a professional. And I was highly competitive at work. I basically I would bring sleep in rather than push deadlines out.
Yeah.
And that's how I lived my life for a while. And I would work out at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 5 in the morning, whatever it took to get a workout in. And I was eating the way I just described. And all of this caught up to me at one point, sometime, I think I was probably around 26, 27, when suddenly I just had this moment where I realized I feel sick. I feel unhealthy, like all the time. This is not like right now. I don't remember the last time I felt good. No energy. Mood was absolute garbage. I was generally a pessimistic outlook. Suddenly, when I had always thought of myself as a fairly optimistic person, I needed to take physical breaks in the middle of an office workday. Like literally sit down and just catch my breath. And
wow.
like I would have cold sweat and this tingling and sort of an itchy sensation all over. And so this stuff had been happening. And at one point I actually went to the medical clinic, and I asked this doctor to help me figure out whether I have a terminal illness, because I have these symptoms that feel like unexplainable otherwise. They're like systemic. And there are some things that I'm not even mentioning here that I haven't really talked about publicly, but like it was affecting every part of my life. Let's just put it that way. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. And so I had no means of understanding this, or without that sort of background, without having a functional medicine or a nutrition platform to really lean on. I was completely without explanation. Like, I'm just eating food. It didn't even cross my mind that something like this could be nutrition focused. Long story short, I talked to a friend who happened to be roommates with an endocrinologist in training. And he said, you know what, it sounds like you might be having blood sugar issues. Like what you're describing, those like breaks where you're shaky and cold sweat and all that. I mean, that sounds like you might be hypoglycemic. Have you checked your blood sugar? And it's like, no one's ever said anything diabetes related. No doctors ever mentioned that. Long, to cut to the chase, I went and got a glucometer, a finger stick, which you can get from a CVS. And I checked my blood sugar a couple times a day. And I was just getting these scatter points that were all over the place. Didn't really tell me anything. But there were some points that were way off the charts, or well below what I would expect. I was waking up and I would get a finger stick that would be like 113. And that's well above that's well into the pre-diabetes sort of space. I read a book called Wired to Eat by Rob Wolf, which came out that year. And in that, he basically describes a blood sugar-based protocol to like calibrating against foods that you eat. And then he mentions the CGM at the back as a new technology that is allowing you to do this without the finger stick and on a continuous basis. And that was just the intuitive thing that seemed like, of course, like that's, if there's anything related to blood sugar happening with me, that would be what I would want. And so I went and asked my doctor, same doctor, can I get a CGM? He had, by the way, run a bunch of blood tests and come back empty, nothing to tell me. And at that moment, he basically, I won't say condemned, but everything short of condemned my ask as objectively a privileged request and something that only a hypochondriac would ask for. I was clearly healthy. There's nothing wrong with me. The only thing that's wrong is that I'm asking to use a technology that is for people that are sick. And so I'll try to wrap this up. But basically, my response to him in the moment was, I think you're very wrong about this. Like, I don't know that there's something broken about my blood sugar control. But I can tell you that if your approach is to wait until something fails to start measuring it, then you are incorrect, and this whole system is backwards, because my job is systems engineering, and I measure things to make sure they don't fail. And it sounds like you're waiting until they do and then doing forensics, and that's a different thing.
I'm sure he loved that response.
He did not. I walked out of there without a CGM. Let's put it that way. So eventually I did get a CGM. I actually had to smuggle one in from Australia, because they are prescription controlled here in the US. In Australia, they're over the counter. You can go walk in, buy them, just like that glucometer I got. I put one on, and that was when kind of everything changed for me. My blood sugar over the next 2 weeks, I was monitoring 24/7, and everything I did was wrong. Like every meal I ate that I was confident was going to be a nice, smooth, controlled blood sugar response, I ended up going through the roof. And this was because I was doing things like loading 300 grams of sweet potatoes straight to the face because I had a workout later that day, or glycogen replenishing with a big smoothie with bran flakes and banana and, protein powder for mass gain that has a ton of sugar in it. And so I would be, my blood sugar would be elevated in the 180, 200 range for hours. And that is clearly a dysfunctional metabolic system there. Like there's insulin resistance involved for you to be able to sustain blood sugar levels like that for that amount of time. And yet I didn't have an overweight issue. I didn't have a bunch of extra body fat. I weighed about as much, maybe a little more muscle than I have now, and maybe a few pounds heavier. But there was no outside indicator that would make me think I'm at risk for blood sugar issues.
Yeah.
And this was confusing because anytime you Google blood sugar control, specifically hyperglycemia, it's always related back to obesity for some reason. And so that was really confusing for me, and I was trying to make heads or tails. But what I could rely on is this CGM is just giving me data, and I can look at I can find my own journal articles that tell me risk categories based on blood sugar levels, and I can iterate through trial and error with different foods, different portion sizes, different meal timing. And as I did so, I started to improve those blood sugar spikes. And that was kind of the patient zero experience for me, where I sort of realized this technology is nascent. It's really hard to get, and it's unbelievably powerful. Like the fact that I'm able to just sit down, eat lunch, and see how that affects my body within 30 minutes, that's an entirely new paradigm. And fast forward, that was the idea. Like we need to enable this for more people.
Got it. It's such a powerful story. And I think it's a testament too to like, you truly were your own guinea pig. Like Levels wasn't just this idea of, wow, this would be like a great business model. It was, no, I couldn't get answers. I felt terrible. My life was not going in the direction that I wanted it to. And I was finally able to access this amazing piece of technology, extremely difficult, but you were able to do it and it completely transformed your life. And I think that's a super powerful case study to what you guys are doing. And also, I also read Wired to Eat, by the way. I think it's one of the most underrated books around nutrition and understanding your metabolic health that's out there, because he breaks the science down so succinctly and gives you recipes. And then that CGM test in the back is really worth its weight in gold.
I completely agree. I mean, that book, I credit that book with really starting it all for me. That was, I don't exactly, I think what happened is I just searched, blood sugar after talking to that friend. And food or something to that effect, and it just popped up. It just so happened that it was recent at the moment, but I'm so grateful I found it because it was so clear and so succinct, and it was what caused me to take more seriously that friend's input, was that this cogent article or argument was laid out, along with just a very practical approach to testing it for myself, which is why I bought the book. And so Rob and I communicate now, and it's kind of an out-of-body experience every time.
That's so cool.
Because at the moment when I was reading that and I read the CGM article and snippet, and this was all coming together, I was just like, this guy might have saved my life in some long-term sense.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, it's really the compounding effect of these small decisions over time frames that are decades long, not minutes long, that amount to a health outcome. And I think this is what we fail to think about in our daily lives, is like, we like to think about every morning being a fresh start. Unfortunately, that's not true. Like everything I do today will affect my health in small ways that will affect tomorrow, and on and on and on for decades. And that's how I end up somewhere that I can't explain. Like, how did I suddenly end up with this health diagnosis? Well, nothing. Typically with chronic illness, it's not sudden.
Yeah.
And so, I have to credit Rob with potentially intervening for me, and hopefully that cascades.
Dude, 100%. And I think that's such a good point where, what's the cliche quote? It's Rome wasn't built in a day, but Rome also didn't decay in a day. And it's like thousands and thousands of the wrong reps and iterations that compound over time. And I also think a really impactful part of your story is your willingness to actually push back against your doctor too. Because I think so many people, they're afraid to push back to their doctor, where the average doctor-patient relationship is they say this is what's wrong, they give you prescription, you blanket follow it to a T, you don't deviate from it at all, versus what you're talking about. And even with me with my ulcerative colitis, of really taking that autonomy and that ownership of having that mindset of, I am the CEO of my own health. I don't think something is right, and if you're not going to give me those answers, I'm going to go seek them elsewhere too. Like, who knows where you would have been if you didn't actually do that?
Yeah, I don't have a good explanation other than I had enough personal experience with systems to be able to just in the moment feel an intuitive problem with what he was saying. Like, and there was another element to it, which I think is super important. And that's I'm a pretty strong individualist. I think people have a degree of sovereignty and ownership, and when it extends into my body, like I strictly own what is happening inside my body.
Definitely.
I don't believe that my doctor is responsible for owning my health data. And I think there was a bit of a violation in his ability to deny me access to my own health info. And I felt in that moment that it should be backwards. Like he should be requesting access to my blood sugar data, and I decide whether I trust him enough to give him that access. But it was very disempowering and strange to be asking and to be able to get a flat out denial. I'm trying to pay cash for a technology, a tool that can only tell me information. It can do nothing more. How is it that this can be prevented? And so there was an element of that, which I think it just struck me in all the wrong ways in that moment. But I really encourage people to think about it. Let's just switch the paradigm to financial information. Okay. Imagine you have a financial, accountant or expert, CPA, somebody who is very good at the fundamentals of monetary theory and finance, personal wealth management, whatever you want to say. Is there any circumstance that you would follow their demands or recommendations strictly without ever questioning under any circumstances? And if so, then okay, you must have the best person out there. But I think most of us would say, no, I always second guess, and I'm always doing my own research to make sure that what I'm getting from this person aligns with my own objectives, goals, and that, fundamentally it's built on a foundation I can trust. And that's the paradigm that we need to be approaching health with. In finance, we know we are responsible for not ending up bankrupt.
Yeah.
And so we check our bank account balance. We make sure we're not overdrawing. We're not, more withdrawals than deposits is going to end up in a bad place. We understand that. How is it then that we allow our health to be a black box, offshore it to a physician and say, well, they're the ones that are keeping me healthy. So until they tell me that I'm unhealthy, I'm just going to keep, just doing my thing with my head in the sand. And when the reality is that it's our own actions, our daily withdrawals and deposits that we're making decisions around that are leading to that health outcome.
Yeah.
That person has no leverage over whether I end up sick or not.
Yeah. It's such a good analogy. I would equate a doctor not even allowing you to purchase a CGM through them. That would be the equivalent of a financial advisor not even showing you how like a mutual fund is performing that you invested through them too.
Exactly. And I would go a step further and say it's literally like, take that bankruptcy analogy and just say, don't go bankrupt. I'm not going to show you your bank account balance.
Yeah.
Like as basic as that. You're not allowed to see the fundamentals of what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, in general, you'll get a blood panel once a year or something like that. And that's your sort of like exposure to the accounts, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's a snapshot in time. It shows you nothing about whether or not the model behind it is operating properly. Are you like going like this or are you going like that? And I think we're far too willing. And I don't know how we got here. Unfortunately, I don't have enough perspective over time to understand how the system got to the point where people feel individually like they aren't responsible for their own health in the same way that we're responsible for our own financial outcome.
Yes.
But the world needs to shift to a world to one where, in the same way that we're planning and focusing daily on a retirement plan that we will be able to financially prosper for decades after we get to a certain age, we should also be confident that we're going to be healthy enough to enjoy it.
Definitely.
And why are those not treated similarly?
Yeah, it's such a good point. Yeah, these things that we're talking about, they really are, holistic assets. It's such a good story. It even reminds me of my own experience with ulcerative colitis, where I was pushing my GI to get me off of the biologic drugs that I was on because I had this, and I started developing this really bad cystic acne from it. So like these drugs are treating one thing and then they're causing all these other side effects. And I was really confident that it was this drug that I was taking that was causing me to break out. And I also just felt like my inflammation and my microinflammation was gone because I was so strict carnivore. So I was thinking to myself, why am I continuing to stay on this drug that has all these deleterious side effects? And I just kept pushing him. And finally he was willing to take me off the drugs. But if I wasn't so insistent, he would have had me on the drugs for the rest of my life, because that's what traditional medicine tells you about biologics, is you have to stay on these things forever because there's no cure for autoimmune diseases. But if I didn't have that same mindset that you had, I would still be on those drugs right now and be susceptible to whatever side effects would come in the future.
My co-founder, Casey, always talks about this flaw in the system, which is that through our approach, probably going back many decades, where the body was so complicated and we didn't know anything about it, that we had to compartmentalize it and slice it into subsystems. So you have arbitrarily, you got head and neck surgeons, or you have like people focused on neurology. You have cardiologists, you have all these individual specialists, and it's necessary. These are super complex systems. And so we had to like, I think, develop schools of thought around them. The problem is that when you project that out, now you have all of these different subspecialties that only look at optimizing their one system. And there's a thing called local optimization, which is that you've improved one thing at the expense of others. It is not the true optimum. It's just the optimum for that one subset. And that's what we do is we go to a GP who isn't capable of identifying the specific issue. They send you to a specialist. The specialist can, but they don't care about cascading effects. They're just focusing on, okay, we're going to improve X. And in your case, that's exactly what you were experiencing, is at the expense of other side effects that, they're not a dermatologist. So they're not going to care about cystic acne. So what Casey is really ardent about is systems biology, which is that everything is connected and shares underpinnings, one of which is all the cells in our bodies need energy. They need to be able to produce it without deleterious byproducts. We have mitochondria in each of our cells that are they're the little powerhouses generating our energy. And if we are creating cascading mitochondrial issues or affecting certain tissues in a certain way through an intervention that are damaging those cells, that's the next chip to fall. Like, you may be able to prop this one up, but you're going to be taking another pill for this other one shortly thereafter. And this systems biology concept merges all this together and takes a zoomed out view and tries to the best of our ability to understand the root cause. What is causing the system to have an emerging consequence in one subsystem over here, like whether it's the heart or whether it's the lungs or what have you. And it's really surprising to me that this is considered still fringe. Like, this is considered a fringe perspective. I mean, to me, it's like, it's objectively true.
Yes.
There's no arguing about that. It's just whether or not I think people are willing to accept what interventions come from that is maybe controversial, but because it would transform a lot of our positions, even on these illnesses like diabetes, where, so the treatment for diabetes, we'll talk about type 2 diabetes, which is the chronic illness, typically lifestyle related, is to, once you get insulin resistant enough, to begin injecting insulin to control your blood sugar levels. The problem is type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance. So more insulin leads to more insulin resistance to manage the same glucose load. There is no doctor out there, no endocrinologist, that will tell you that exogenous insulin injections will fix diabetes at all. But that is the treatment. That's the intervention, is to get on a lifetime of additional insulin, making you more insulin resistant over time, to the point where that fails and ultimately a system, whether your heart or your brain, dies and you go with it. And unfortunately, that's just the paradigm.
Yeah.
Now, if you instead look at it not as not as that zeroed in, like glucose is high, therefore we have to control it. If you instead think, why is glucose high? You'll come to a different conclusion, and you will not, in any circumstance, or in most circumstances, start injecting the thing that's causing the problem, which is insulin resistance.
That's crazy to think about. It's mind-boggling to think about. And I also just wonder, do you have a sense of how much the U.S. spends on insulin a year for type 2 diabetics? I've heard I forget what this, I know it's an astronomical
number. It's one of the big, it is literally a congressional topic constantly, is the cost of insulin.
Yeah.
Because there's many reasons for that. There's other like incentives there where, insulin was a gift to the world. The patent owners open sourced it. And now we make all these complicated modifications to the molecule so we can patent those and keep prices high. That said, the fact that we have, you have companies like Virta who are showing what is well known, which is that well known but was previously questioned until Virta showed it once again, which is that using strictly diet and lifestyle intervention, you can reverse type 2 diabetes. You can become you are not manifesting the condition of diabetes through diet and lifestyle. And the CDC and the NIH, the World Health Organization, all of them agree that diabetes is also preventable through lifestyle and diet modifications. So type 2 in particular. So I don't know what we're disagreeing about when we say that it is inherently a lifestyle condition and the medication, insulin, doesn't solve it. So why are we turning to that as the standard of care?
Yeah.
It's like somewhere along the way we sort of break down the model sort of skips, and it's like and then insulin. And I just, I still can't explain it.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the documentary Fat Fiction?
I don't think so.
It's free on YouTube. I think it came out in like 2020. And one of the most striking parts of that documentary, because they're just debunking all the myths around saturated fat and why animal products and saturated fat are actually really good for you, and how we've kind of unjustly blamed saturated fat for what processed carbs and sugar have been doing to us over the last 50 years. But one of the best parts of that whole documentary is they show this endocrinologist in San Diego, Dr. Brian Lensis, who I think he's been an endocrinologist for close to 20 years, did all the, standard treatments like you're talking about, prescribing insulin, had never gotten a single type 2 patient off of insulin before. He found himself close to 100 pounds overweight, went low carb / carnivore, lost 100 pounds, started getting his type 2 diabetic patients on it. He said within the first year, I think he got like a dozen patients off insulin. And so I'm watching this and I'm like, this is unbelievable. But there was still kind of part of my brain that was skeptical. I ended up connecting with him when I lived out in San Diego and went to one of his low carb meetups. And I met like 10 women, all women, which was really interesting, that all told me that they had followed the same low carb protocol and got off insulin for the first time in their lives.
It's amazing.
It's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's, Virta, I don't think goes carnivore, but it is, I think, a ketogenic protocol. But, the point being, type 2 diabetes is because of the insulin resistance. It is a carb intolerance. You just, it's not to say that carbohydrates are inherently bad or that no one should eat them. That's not the argument I'm making. I'm saying if you are severely insulin resistant, it is obvious. It is just inherently true that you cannot metabolize carbohydrates effectively, and that they are complicating the problem by raising blood sugar levels because you can't bring them down. And that is causing cascading damage. Your tissues are being destroyed as your blood sugar rises over and over time. And so, instead of solving that root problem, which as we see, and this is now, we now are several years past the Virta result, and now there are many programs that are doing the same thing, replicating the results. If you remove that insult, the body can heal. You can become more insulin sensitive. I have seen this. My blood sugar control, I've introduced so many more carbs than I did 5 years ago into my daily routine, and I feel great. I train well. I keep them under control. I make sure that my blood sugar, if it does elevate, it's going to be for a high fiber, blueberries, for example. I'll have a spike from blueberries, but they're high fiber, and my blood sugar comes straight back down into range, where I used to spend all this time out of range for hours and hours, and then I would crash. And so anyway, there's all these important nuances about, whether or not for an individual a certain dietary protocol makes sense. And frankly, like, people just think that that there is some inherent truth that you should be able to eat any food, otherwise you need medicine. Yeah. And I disagree.
Yeah. So obviously for you, the CGM was a massive catalyst for really getting your metabolic health under control. And I really appreciated the nuance you brought to the carbohydrate question. And that was what I wanted to ask you, is just, what is your just general philosophy that you think people should understand about carbs in general? Because, it's very tough to understand now what diet should we be going on, because you're hearing carnivore, you're hearing paleo, people that were carnivore now going animal-based, where they're drinking a ton of raw milk and a lot of fruit, to the point where I'm like, if I'm taking someone 30 pounds overweight, I don't know if I would be putting them on an animal-based diet, but I do know there can be benefits to carbs. So maybe how do you think about working carbohydrates into your diet? And maybe that could be a template for other people to follow too.
Yeah, well, firstly, I'll start with, I think there's a massive amount of diversity in how people respond to the same foods.
Yes.
And I don't just think that. Like, I know that to be true. It's in our data set. There is a published trial from 2015, the Weizmann Institute. They took 800 people without diabetes, gave them all CGMs, and fed them standardized meals. And they showed that two people can eat the exact same two food items and have equal and opposite blood sugar responses. So banana, cookie, one person has a huge spike on the cookie, and dead flat on the banana, and the other person had the exact opposite response.
That's insane.
So this is in the data. It is true. What I think is happening here is we all have a context: genetic, microbiomic, body composition, how well slept are we, how trained are we, how stressed are we. I've seen the impacts of all of these things on my own body and my own response to a specific meal item. And unfortunately, like, we're afraid of that amount of nuance. We don't want that. We want to say, no, beans are good.
Yes.
Just eat beans or don't eat beans. And unfortunately, or fortunately, because now we have the technologies to be able to tell the difference, I think it's a contextual decision. When I'm in training mode and I am burning a ton of carbohydrates, unless I'm planning to stay in a ketogenic state where I'm going to have a low appetite, but I'm going to have a lot of readily available energy, I'm going to be adding carbohydrates to my diet because that's how I feel best. I'm not going to overdo it. I don't believe in the whole glycogen replenishment, instantaneously with hundreds of grams of pasta anymore. That doesn't work for me. That's going to make me sick. Nor do I think that I need to be carb loading the way that Olympic athletes are, because I'm not an Olympic athlete, right? So I need to be taking in the right amount of carbs that I feel good. They're glycemically friendly for me, which means high fiber and consumed with high protein, and not more. And if I eat more, then I start this roller coaster of blood sugar spikes and crashes, hunger, and I spiral out of control. And so I think my point is that we know there's a very diverse set of responses. People need to have some intuition and ideally, some tool to be able to tell whether they are properly metabolizing the carbohydrates that they do eat. And then I'll just say, if I'm going to give any generic recommendations, and again, I'm not a medical professional, but any generic recommendations, it's going to be replace most of the other stuff with protein and fiber. And that's a pretty good start. So, I don't vilify fat. I personally have probably a high protein, moderate fat, low carb approach to living, and certainly low carb relative to a standard American diet. But I will cycle some higher carbs depending on training volume, and sometimes some lower carbs if I'm going to be more sedentary and I know that I'm at risk for over snacking. For me, the carbohydrates are the ones that I will just overindulge in. So I have to have more discipline around those.
Are there any carbs that you found through rigorous testing that sit particularly well with you? And were there any carbs that actually surprised you that they didn't do super well with your blood sugar levels?
Yeah, I mean, basically all of the carbohydrates that if you Google glycemic load or glycemically friendly carbs, things have improved a bit because we've gotten some more of this like real, education out there. But, the ones that I would have previously thought were going to be great for me would be brown rice, sweet potatoes, oatmeal. So the sort of like staples that people recommend, whole grains, sourdough bread, 0 of those are compatible with my system for some reason. I think most of those are relatively highly processed. With the brown rice, I consider to be a processed food. Not so for sweet potatoes, but I actually of those, that's the one I eat most frequently. But I'll have smaller portion sizes. But I mean, one of the worst foods in the data set is oatmeal for us. It's just a highly processed. It basically breaks down before you even get it into your system. It's almost pre-digested. It's cooked down. It's been ground up. It's a very fast acting, high glycemic response carbohydrate. The ones that I would say I currently depend on and work super well for me are really berries. Yeah, super high fiber, delicious in my opinion.
So good.
I default to blueberries, strawberries, raspberries. Can't get enough. I love some of the more exotic fruits that my co-founder has exposed me to. One of them is called longan berries. They're like nicknamed dragon eyes. Delicious. A little more work. You get less fruit for the peeling you got to do.
But they're delicious though.
But they're great. Yeah. And so I really default to make sure the carbohydrate has a lot of fiber in its matrix, and not eating many bananas, I would say.
How about white rice?
I could eat in the words of Peter Attia, a bathtub full of white rice, but I don't. So that's one of the foods that probably the worst blood sugar responses I've had is straight white rice or a rice bowl or something. So the brown rice I thought was that's the answer. All the traditional nutrition advice is it's a more glycemic friendly version of rice. No difference for me. Yeah. So if I'm going to eat rice, it's going to be white rice, basmati in particular.
It's so damn good.
It's just delicious.
So delicious. Yeah, I could eat steak and rice every single day.
100%.
I wish I could, but similar to you, that's why tools like Levels are so effective, is because you actually get the data and can understand, is this good for me or not? And my blood sugar just spikes so much, because you see a lot of these bodybuilding guys that are in incredible shape that swear by, ground beef and rice and things like that. And every time I try and do it, I can see my blood sugar spike. And I just have those wide-waisted white guy genetics where I just kind of blow up when I eat a lot of white rice.
I get very similar effects. I mean, I'm much more in tune with my body, I would say now. This is one of the interesting benefits of, not just CGM. For sure, CGM has taught me more about interoception, or being able to connect a sensation to something that's happening. Yeah. But also, wrist-worn wearables, heart rate. I'm much more in tune with my pulse, my blood pressure, and blood sugar based on sensation now, and I can essentially guess where my blood sugar is without needing to check my CGM at this point because of years of using it. But along with that has come like a real intuition around some of these these effects of foods that I used to eat constantly, and I was just constantly in the state of experiencing that symptom, and therefore I didn't think of it as a symptom. That's just my existence, which is why I thought I was terminally ill.
Yeah,
it's really crazy to think back on and be like that is the water I was swimming in, and now I know when I have steak and rice versus steak and broccoli, like I know the difference, and yeah, I mean one of them works well.
It's cool to think that like 7 years ago you were the guy that was eating Skittles for dinner, and now you're the guy that can basically predict your blood sugar levels based on what you eat. That's how much intuition you've built up over time by really caring about this and investing in it.
It's funny. My family initially didn't take too well to that.
Yeah,
as you can imagine. It's hard not. It's funny because I have to take the L on it. I was just a complete nutritional disaster, and along the way I definitely was giving bad advice to people and scoffing at a lot of people who really took seriously nutrition, and I feel really bad about it. But I had to learn the hard way, and I think there's a certain degree of like immortality at a young age. Like you just haven't yet come to face with your own mortality. You haven't experienced something that tells you that you can't tolerate eating, drinking, not sleeping forever. That's going to catch up at some point. And I just, I was one of those people that felt invincible for a long time and therefore didn't have to think about it. And I think unfortunately, this is like one of the major challenges is a lot of these health issues become super ingrained and set in stone at a younger age. Especially as we have more processed foods that we call kids foods and rely on, you just get that becomes your comfort food. You love it, you identify it with it. And then by the time you become an adult and you start to experience the consequences, like you don't even consider it. In fact, you turn to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then part of the issue too, to your point, is that your metabolic baseline is just so consistently low because all you know is this processed food that you don't even have that comparison of what real food, how that could actually make you feel, and the fact that you're fundamentally transforming who you are as a person, right? I'm similar to you going through college, just binge drinking, ton of processed foods. Like my baseline level was so low. And then when I finally went carnivore, and it wasn't even necessarily carnivore, it was more of just taking the autonomy of the food I was putting in my system and cooking my meals. I felt so damn good that I remember thinking to myself, there's no way I'm ever going back to that. But most people they've never created that comparison. So they don't understand that there's all this potential that you're missing out on because they've never tried that before.
Absolutely. I think, well, I hope as these ideas become more accessible and the tools to make them really easy. And one thing that's I think actually really important to say is I do not feel like I'm in a state of discipline or like I'm in some way lacking indulgence at all. I mean, you can ask my wife, love the food that I eat.
Yes.
I'm obsessed with it. Like I taste it in new ways and appreciate it in new ways now than I ever did before. I used to pursue like the most rich, indulgent, like combination of sugar and fat and whatever at one time possible to chase that high almost. And I mean, it really was like unhealthy behavior when I think about it, because I mean, that was what I was seeking. And now I'm seeking something that is nourishing me at a basic level, and that also, because of its simplicity and its preparation and my involvement in selecting it and pursuing good ingredients, I just appreciate it as like almost as a creative process. And also the effects, which are that I feel great. I feel amazing after my meals. I feel energized. I'm able to do the things I want to do. I don't have any of those consequences or side effects that I used to have because of the food that I'm also tasting and finding delicious. I mean, it's like too good to be true almost.
It's such an important mindset too, because I think there are people that are afraid that once you go down this lifestyle, you're missing out on, the pleasures of food. And it always makes me think back to that book, The Dorito Effect. Did you ever read that book by Mark Schatzker?
I don't know.
You would love it because you've talked about hyperpalatability a few times. He's this investigative journalist that goes into the flavor houses of these big food companies and interviews a bunch of the food scientists and basically dissects how these companies create these hyperpalatable combinations and seasonings and things that are artificial, where you put your hand into a bag of Doritos, you're eating the entire thing, no matter how bad it is for you.
Yep.
And he talks about the ability to actually rewire your taste buds, where when you're eating real foods, you're rewiring your taste buds, where you're like appreciating the incredible flavor of the fat of a ribeye or the saltiness of a ribeye. and it'll take you a few weeks once you're switching from the ultra processed garbage to real food. But once you get through that transition, like you said, your appreciation for food and taste, it's the best. And there does live this world where you can truly love every single bite of food that you have and also get into incredible shape from it as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best part about it. Like, you can eat your way to a healthier life.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just wouldn't have thought that possible, or even like, they were, the crazy part is, at a younger age, I thought those were two entirely separate things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like physical fitness was health, and then food was what you used to fuel your physical fitness. And so yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I'm very appreciative of having that insight and being able to access the information so early in life, because I think there's an opportunity to really extend, obviously, health span as a function of all these benefits.
Yeah. You also have this really cool combination of this like engineering skill set where you're really into the data, and you also seem like someone that you're able to have this intuition and enjoy your life as well. What do you think is like the right mindset behind CGM and wearables, where you're getting the valuable information, you're getting everything you need from levels, but you're not letting the data over consume you?
Yeah. Very good question. I mean, this one's tricky because there are different personalities at stake. You know, for me, the benefits that I get from CGM now are a lot different than they were in the beginning. In the beginning, it was a mind-blowing realization constantly. It's just like every day I was coming across some unintuitive realization that, oh, that's, you know, so when my blood sugar is crashing from 180, that's when I needed to get another coffee, or when I would literally feel like I needed to have a nap. Or that sensation I would feel when I would fuel up for a run and then run out the door was my muscles over-consuming glucose, in combination with a huge blood sugar spike that insulin has been released in my system is also bringing down, and I bonk. And that's what that effect is, and why my run times are so different on a Monday after when I run in the morning right after that shake versus in the evening. All these intuitive and counterintuitive things coming together is like a magic moment powerhouse for me. Now, I've learned many of those lessons. I'm rarely surprised by something that happens, but it's an accountability mechanism.
Yeah.
So I'm much more likely to act the way I want to act when I know that the data is there and I'm going to look at it and I'm going to see it. And it's the same reason that I've, for all intents and purposes, stopped drinking, and certainly stopped drinking later in the evening, because, you know, my Garmin would show me my sleep quality the next day, my HRV, my heart rate, and they would just be destroyed by a single glass of wine at 9 p.m. or something. And it just isn't worth it to me because it doesn't align with my objectives. And of course, like that said, I don't live in a single mode all the time.
Yeah.
And so I indulge, and when I know I'm going to be on holidays with my family, or when I'm cooking a celebratory meal with my wife, or even if I've just like been really good for a week or a couple weeks and I just want to get some ice cream, like I do that. And at the same time, I don't ignore that there's like a lesson to be learned there. Like I will typically indulge in something that, again, I said ice cream or a cheesecake or something that is more of a rich meal that I find is delicious, but is going to actually have a slightly better impact on me than just literally eating pure granulated sugar like I used to in the form of candy. You know, so it's like it's made its way into even my sort of cheat meals, but I don't recommend anybody use this as a disciplinary tool. It's just telling you it's already happening.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's maybe the most important realization is there is no external party disciplining you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a connection between what's happening in your body and your brain, so you can actually see it. It's exposing the reality in a useful way, in an awareness way. And I think that awareness is always useful, always important. And if it's starting to feel disciplinary, it might be a good time to sort of take a break. But even for those folks that feel it's overly disciplinary, it's also important to recognize that it evolves over time. Mm-hmm. So, you know, as age sets in, as your context in life changes, you have a baby, you're not sleeping well, change jobs, get in better shape, get in worse shape, all that affects how you'll respond to the foods you're eating. So it's always useful, I think, to check in with awareness tools like this to just see where things are, even if you don't need to wear it continuously.
Definitely. No, I think that's an amazing answer. And I don't know if this is the right or the wrong way to wear levels, but when I've used the CGM, I actually try and be decently disciplinary when I'm with it. And my thought process is, you know, I have skin in the game. I've paid money for this thing. I'm going to wear it for like 30 to 60 days. I love pairing it with a food journal. I mean, obviously you guys have the app, so you can pop in everything and understand what foods and the timing and how that relates to your blood sugar. But I love keeping a food journal and just saying like, look, I'm wearing this thing for 60 days. Let me see how disciplined and dialed in I can be. And I'm not saying this is going to be my normal for 12 months out of the year, but I think there's like, I don't know, there's like this mental and spiritual component that I love of just like trying to just be firing on all cylinders. And I feel like a CGM is such a cool catalyst to get all these different buckets in your life and your health together too.
I love that approach too. And there's a lot of people that use it in that context. And I think it makes total sense. It's sort of like a bit of a Whole30 sprint or like there are other approaches that tend to focus on this, like get a reset going, get back on track, something like that. It's a super useful tool for that. And the feedback is so powerful I particularly like recommending to people, if your plan is to start a CGM or start levels January 1st or January 2nd, maybe start actually December 20th and capture some of that reality, right? Just
Definitely
capture it, but don't overinvest in it. You're going to start on January 2nd. But the powerful thing is the relative change. And so going from the chaos of holidays into a bit of a ritual or a habit, changing all of those factors, food, sleep, exercise, and seeing things just like snap into order is a beautiful thing for me.
It is a beautiful
I love
thing.
seeing that. It can be a little bit stressful for people who are hyper competitive and just like can't tolerate the fact that blood sugar is going crazy. Like maybe don't wear it over the holidays, but for a lot of folks, I think it's one of the most amazing realizations is that because there's a slight risk of when you put the CGM on when everything is dialed, you kind of lose some of the learning because some of the learning is actually those realizations that although that frosted cookie wasn't great, like that cheesecake was basically flat. Like that's a realization in and of itself. Or the impact of alcohol like is hyper counterintuitive for most people.
Yeah. That's such an interest. I'm gonna have to do that next year then, where it's like just strap it on for a week, almost pretend like it doesn't even exist, and then just kind of monitor the data before you make those changes.
Yeah. Treat it as observational instead of interventional.
Definitely. And the thing I love about levels too is I think a lot of people get caught up in the sake of wearing wearables for the sake of wearing it, and they love the data. But it's like we need the data to develop intuition, which is what you've talked about, where I'm sure you'll continue to put levels on, but you've gotten to the point where you have this amazing intuition around like, okay, I'm eating this. This is probably spiking my blood sugar. I'm in tune with how I feel. This makes me feel good. This makes me feel really bad. And I think that's ultimately the goal with all this technology is don't just get caught up in the data for the sake of that. Like use it to actually develop that amazing intuition so you can go live an incredible life.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. It's an awareness tool. That's how we talk about it. This is drawing attention to what's really happening and showing you again, with a lot of the hyperpalatable foods, there is no obvious consequence. And the way we make decisions as humans is like we seek optimization, we seek improvement in some direction. And when you only have the feedback of flavor, because we evolved as humans in an environment where every calorie was a life-saving calorie, and so our hardwiring didn't keep up with the Industrial Revolution, where in a single meal I can eat more processed sugar than I could access in a lifetime not long ago, right? So we just simply don't have the tools to keep up with that. We don't have the sixth sense vector to tell what's going on inside. We just have taste.
Yeah.
And so without an ability to expose what's happening on the inside, which I think we need to use technology to help us do, we'll never develop that sixth sense. But what's really crazy is this interoception thing. It is almost like an evolving phantom sensation, like something, I don't know why I can now tell my blood sugar. It's subtle hints. It's like, maybe it's a pulse rate, maybe it's a body temperature thing, a flushing in my face, small little hints, but together I've now synthesized the ability to tell something about my internal condition that I couldn't previously tell. And it's only because technology existed, not technology to measure blood sugar, because measuring it once a year doesn't give me that. Measuring it continuously in the real world as I'm responding to the things that I'm doing, the choices I'm making, is how I evolved that. And I think that's a really important and instructive lesson, is that the tools to help people understand their health state and improve over time have to be dynamic and continuous. They have to be like, I can't wait until the scale increases by 10 pounds to start wondering, how did I get here? Like, what should I eat for lunch tomorrow? What's better is to understand in the moment when I eat something for lunch, how that affected me as immediately as possible. And that's how my behaviors will be able to update, and I'll be able to connect the dots between the reaction my body's experiencing and a sensation inside.
That's super interesting. So you're not even looking for one trigger in particular. There's just kind of this like general intuition that you've developed over years where you're like, I know my blood sugar is spiked.
I don't I can point to a few subtle things. Yeah, like if we were to go for a run after I eat a sugary meal, like this happens like clockwork. I'm going to bonk, and which for many people they'll eat a bagel right before a run or something like that. I can't do it, and there's something about my insulin release that's I think a little bit delayed. So I'll have a huge blood sugar spike. My body will then flood me with insulin, and that will couple with my muscles absorbing more glucose, and I'll overcompensate and crash. And when that's happening, I mean, it's a confluence of things. I get a pit in my stomach, I get shaky legs, I get a cold sweat, my pulse rate quickens. So like at a certain pace, the first indication is that my heart rate will be slightly higher for that pace than it usually is. That's my first indicator. Then the next one is I'll start to get that pit in the stomach, and then the cold like skin sensation. And so I can call those things out as they're happening on a run.
Yeah. And
know that, okay, this is, I'm going to crash here. Like that was a bad meal timing. But in the more subtle like experiences, for example, when my blood sugar's relatively stable and in range, I can't quite tell you what it is, but I think a lot of it has to actually do with body temperature, which is maybe like, yeah, I'd have to make some guesses and then go do some studies on it to be able to really know. But all that to say, something's happening in the background that is processing these things.
Got it. As you're talking, I keep thinking back to one of the points you made earlier, when you really felt like things were starting to go wrong while you were working at SpaceX, and you said that like you weren't excited about the work you were doing. I think maybe you might have used the term miserable, or you just weren't happy. And it makes me think about, like, I wish people understood that the things that we're talking about, metabolic health, the food that you put into your body, it's not just being healthy for the sake of healthy. Like if you get your health under control, it's truly a gateway to have like the best mindset that you've ever had and fundamentally become a different person. And I think about, I mean, SpaceX was probably a dream job for you. You're working with the highest level, highest caliber people you could possibly work with, and you're still miserable. And like, that's what happens when you don't have metabolic health. There's a company that we work pretty closely with, Blokes. It's like a male telemedicine company, hormone health company. And he says that, the founder says that the people that thank them the most aren't actually the male patients. It's the wives of the male patients, because they're directly seeing the changes in their husbands or boyfriends or whoever. And I wish people understood that fact, that like wearing levels is not just to get your blood sugar in line for the sake of being healthy. It will fundamentally transform who you are as a person, mentally, physically, et cetera.
It's I think, again, in the words of my co-founder, Casey, food is information. It's telling your cells what to do. Your cells then take that information and turn you into a new version of yourself. You turn over all the cells in your body effectively. I mean, not entirely, but most of the cells in your body on the order of months. And so we're entirely transforming the building blocks of who we are: body, brain, all at one, all together. And what we expose those tissues to is, I mean, it's self-evident that it's important to bathe those tissues in the right information if we want them to function properly. And, it's important to say the connection between metabolic dysfunction and suicidal ideation, mental disorders that range the spectrum from breaks to depression, depressive episodes, mania, the correlations are always there. So across all of those conditions, you are at a higher likelihood if you have a diagnosed condition like diabetes than without. Alzheimer's disease is being taught. So my wife's a registered nurse. When she was going through nursing school, she sent me a presentation deck from her curriculum titled Alzheimer's, type 3 diabetes. So it is being taught that way because in Alzheimer's disease, the brain becomes insulin resistant in the same way that peripheral tissues become insulin resistant in type 2 diabetes. And, the directional causality is not entirely understood. But the point is that we have no reason to think that like something that can affect our bodies in such a profound way that it can literally glycate the tissues, stick to proteins, break down the function of our cells, ruin our nerves, our nerve endings, cause heart disease, stroke, that it couldn't somehow affect the brain. And we know, in fact, it does. I think one of the things that was really interesting recently is there was a lot of, certainly on my Twitter bubble, a lot of discussion about how a recent study showed that SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, may not actually function the way we thought, that the reuptake of serotonin may actually not be the axis that they're working on. And I thought it was really interesting because it shows how little we understand about the things we think we understand. And when people roll their eyes at the idea that a different nutrition philosophy can change your predisposition to depression, I kind of have to like roll my eyes right back because it's an unfounded skepticism. And as somebody who can look at lifestyle-related conditions driving directly the rates of depression, suicidal ideation, and Alzheimer's disease, or potentially Alzheimer's disease, I should say, I have to wonder why we would not connect those dots.
Yeah. Yeah, like the hubris to just think that food has nothing to do with your mindset or your mental health is insane.
Yeah, I think it really is. And it's a shame because there's, I understand there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in food. I mean, trust me, I love eating food.
Yes.
Deeply, as you can tell. And you don't have to give that up. And I think that's why people feel really, really threatened by the idea that there has to be some challenge to their eating habits or some change. I empathize, but at the same time, it's no reason to hold back on what is actually going on and challenging the existing status quo, which is a food system that is making people sick, mentally and physically.
Well, one of the things that gets me extremely excited about what you're doing is I think back to my own experience going carnivore, being so desperate to just try and get my gut health under control, get this inflammation out of my body. Still to this day, the biggest DM requests that I get are people that are struggling with Crohn's, colitis, IBS, autoimmune, et cetera, that are just so desperate to get answers. And I think about all the people that are like deprived of this information from their doctor because something like carnivore or paleo is just labeled as being purely anecdotal. When what gets me excited is for companies like you that are effectively are going to have these massive pools of data of people that have tried these alternative diets that are able to improve their blood sugar and potentially, get off these drugs and things like that. I feel like technology like yours will actually legitimize some of these alternative health movements because you'll actually have the data to support that these different diets and modalities are effective and working. And we have the data to back that up.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the future, what's really amazing is because we've had this technology revolution, miniaturized electronics, now more power dense batteries, optical systems that are getting smaller and smaller, and supercomputers in our pockets. Mm-hmm. We have the ability now to totally change the approach to medical research and to healthcare, where right now the gold standard is a randomized, clinically controlled, double-blinded trial, where you take some handful of people, as big as the study power requires, and you take a few data points on them. So this might be a large group of people with a few data points because that's all you can get in a short time period. And then you sort of run some analysis on that, average the numbers in interesting ways, and then make that the finding. So this is the average of the findings for this large group of people on which we took a few data points.
Yeah.
That's our current gold standard. And I think that has to go away entirely. And we need to go to an N of one, single individual, and maximum number of data points possible. And we have the compute the compute capability and the technology now to actually make that possible. So we can do massive data collection for an individual that is constantly monitoring one's health state. And when somebody has a health finding, it's based on them. It's modeled based on what we know about the systems underlying it, but it's based on only your data. So this finding isn't an average of people who have nothing in common with you. And for women in particular right now, so many of the health findings that we are basing best practice on are strictly derived from male-only studies. This is just a fact. And that's not even getting into other demographics and backgrounds. Do we have the same racial representation in all of our studies? No, of course not. So, right now we're using poor data because we are just constrained in the way that we approach it. And anyway, to make a long story short, I'm super excited because yes, these tools are going to be able to give not only some legitimacy to what were otherwise these sort of fringe ideas, not just diets and movements around nutrition, but also functional medicine and systems biology. And it will change, I think, in the long term, the way that we conduct research, the way we think about healthcare in general. It's going to be on a very individual basis, and that's going to be a luxury and that I think will be very accessible in the same way that iPhones are very accessible.
If that doesn't make you encouraged to understand that people are thinking about these highly personalized experiences to really help you address the root causes of what's going on, I don't know what could possibly make you more excited. Because I just think about all the people that are just banging their heads against the wall, just hoping that they had some type of a doctor that's covered by insurance that would talk to them about some of these different modalities, and they're just not getting the answers that they look for. But now that there's companies like you and some of these other emerging brands that really want to put the power back into the patient and allow you to maybe be your own doctor in a sense and be able to give people the guardrails that they really need.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to scale that ability. We need to put people back in the driver's seat of their health and make them feel not just responsible, but empowered to be able to do something about that responsibility. And right now, the system is not structured for that incentive. It's going to change. It's going to change typically, I think, outside of the traditional healthcare systems where it's going to start. A lot of consumer tools, a lot of real grassroots education like this podcast, getting people thinking and getting them searching and seeking. And then it will be kind of like, I think, for example, this AI revolution that's happening is making complexity more approachable. So you can ask simple questions about complex topics and get a really compelling answer, regardless of your familiarity with it. And so all this, I think, is going to merge together into a new system, not a revision of the current one, because I just don't know that you can renovate what exists right now.
This is probably a dumb question, but why would a CGM not be covered by insurance for a non-diabetic patient? Because the reason, and just to preface that, I just think through myself and the experience I had with the CGM, and I'm like, how much money could these insurance companies be saving if they just covered these very basic CGMs? And I'm sure you get asked this question literally every single day, but it still boggles my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I have to just smile because I asked the same question, and the reality is that still we do not have a widely accepted understanding, or let's just say a shared opinion about what is driving the epidemic of diabetes. Even though the CDC's website right now, you can go to the Diabetes Prevention Program website, and you can see that if you are pre-diabetic or at risk for diabetes based on genetic history, you can change these certain things about your lifestyle and improve your likelihood of avoiding that condition. So they say that and they believe that. But for some reason, it is controversial to say that eating habits, and in particular eating certain types of heavily processed, carb-laden, refined foods, directly is driving that, and thus wearing a CGM and modifying behaviors away from those decisions will improve your likelihood. So that is somehow we haven't made that leap. And yes, so what it's going to take is moving the needle with hard evidence, and that's what we're working on. We have the largest IRB-approved study ever for general population CGM use. So we are collecting massive amounts of data on the real-world use cases of CGM, covering long time frames as people use CGM in their real lives and eat different types of foods, and how their sort of health markers progress. And I think it's going to be data sets like that are going to show concretely that this does have an impact. And then you'll see a real clamoring for insurance companies to be like, oh, wow, this is a huge realization. We need to, if we can even move the needle on diabetes by a single percentage point, that's going to be a massive improvement to our bottom line. And then it will flip all at once, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what 1 percentage point would be billions and billions of dollars saved, right?
We're on track by 2030 to type 2 diabetes alone is on track to cost $600 billion to the U.S. GDP. And so you're on the order of 20% ish of healthcare expenses overall are driven by basically diabetes. And of course that includes some of the side effects. Heart disease is frequently driven by the condition of diabetes. But the point is again, this is systems biology. I think that's probably underselling the amount that we would improve GDP if you were able to eliminate type 2 diabetes as a concern for our population.
Are you encouraged at all by the response that Levels has, how has Levels been received by traditional Western medicine? Are you encouraged by that, or is there part of you that's we're just gonna have to build an entirely new system?
Well, I'm actually more encouraged recently than I was at the beginning. Starting out with Levels, it was not encouraging at all. Frequently got very unhappy interactions with the sort of traditional system and folks inside of it who felt that this was a toy and that it would tell you useless information. It took a little bit of time, but having more evidence from people, like Betsy on our website, who shared her story, and just by using a CGM after decades of struggling, she lost 80 pounds over the course of a few months, and that was just using her CGM data every day to refine her decisions. So once you have incontrovertible case studies like that, people start to pay attention. So it's been improving. But I think what's really interesting is I'm most optimistic about this sort of next generation that's going through medical school now, because I think there's so much of this in the conversation through podcasts, through, tools like Levels that are out there and in the consumer conscience, that people who are entering medical school or who are going through it, they are technologists, by and large. And, they've grown up with technology and they think about these things differently. And I think that's where we're resonating the most, is we're really getting a ton of really exciting outreach, and many people who are in medical school today who are using our product and stoked about it. And, Casey teaches a course at Stanford, and, she's just getting overwhelming positive response. There isn't this paternalistic reaction, which maybe is a bit gatekeepery, which is like, this is medical information that, the practitioner should own, which is kind of the classic approach, versus now where people are thinking about this as truly like decentralized individual health info that can just help you build a better diet. And so I think that's really encouraging. I'll just add in a note that even though I think these tools will be available widely and much more affordably in the next few years, today, anything that's part of the health record, this is an interesting just anecdote, is not, like, in 49 states and DC, the patient does not own their own health record, their own medical record. The doctor, the hospital system owns it. The only exemption is New Hampshire. And that's because they're like hardcore individualists as well. So that's just an interesting thing, is that the system today is set up such that the person whose data is, whose health is defined by the data, does not own it, and therefore can't make any claim to it. And I think that's why you end up with systems like this, where there could even be a challenge to whether someone could have access to this or not. It's important to say there is a risk for people with type 1 diabetes who are life and death dependent on insulin to on the correct insulin dose to manage their blood sugar. That's life and death. And so a CGM has to perform properly, and these tools are, for that reason, prescription controlled, and rightfully so, and well regulated. But for the use case that we're describing, the barriers will improve, because it's obvious that is a different use case than for type 1. And so we'll be seeing changes to the landscape of tools that are available. And I think all of this pushback that, for the first few years we were getting, and honestly still is quite common, is going to start to fade. And in particular, I think as we branch from being able to measure one thing about the body, which I should say, it is possible to locally optimize just around CGM data, just around glucose. We will see many markers being available in a similar form factor, in a similar platform. And I think that's going to really change the perception of, this is just a fun toy, to this is the future of how we're going to tell what's going on in the body at all. And medical science and medical schools are going to be built on the same technology. They're going to be learning about the human body in the way that individuals today are using it.
That's so well said. My prediction is that I think companies like you are going to make the alternative health movement just the health movement, because for so long, people like me, eating a ton of red meat, a ton of animal products, curing this incurable autoimmune disease that's just being cast off as just, oh, that's anecdotal. And now you're actually able to give me the data to prove that this stuff is quantifiable. It actually does work. So it's no longer this fringe, crazy alternative movement. No, it's just health. These are just principles. Like the fact that we've eaten meat for 2.5 million years and it helps you regulate your blood sugar and all that stuff. Like, you're quantifying these things that should be quantified.
I couldn't agree more. Being able to apply the scientific method does not have to be only done in population scale. And in fact, I would argue that it's probably the worst way to do it. It's the way we had to do it because it's the tools we had available. But you can still run the scientific method on an individual.
Yeah.
And that is still science.
Yes.
And that is gold standard science when we get to the point where the technology is really good. That's what I'm looking forward to. Is like it's going to massively expand our conception of like the possible health conditions that exist and what causes them and who's susceptible to them. And that's a good thing. It's gonna first blow up the space, the problem space, and it will feel intractable. But guess what? Like, that's where we are today.
Yeah.
That's why most drugs have no effect. This is why most people don't get cured when they get a condition. It's because we don't understand actually like what's driving it for that individual. So, or at least that's my opinion. And so I think when we get to the point where we have much finer detail on the individual level, we'll be able to develop tailor-made solutions for an individual. And some of that will be in the pharmaceutical space, I'm sure, but a lot of it is going to be just in the inputs that are driving that output. Like, why was I experiencing insulin resistance? Because I was eating my way to it. I was living a lifestyle that can only lead to insulin resistance. I was sleeping poorly. I was making sure to disrupt my sleep with as much exercise and alcohol as close to bed as possible. and I was stressing myself out with, an insane work schedule while consuming massive and intolerable quantities of carbohydrates that I just was not metabolizing effectively. Like, there's no mystery there.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I'm just thinking about just your background as an engineer, and I would imagine it's probably a superpower in a lot of ways. And I feel like the people that are having some of the most impactful voices in the health space right now actually are outsiders. Like, I think about your engineering background. I think about Dave Feldman's engineering background and what he's doing with this whole like lean mass hyperresponder theory and all the great work he's publishing. And then even people like, Gary Taubes, Nina Teicholz, they're investigative journalists that are really teaching people about nutrition in a way that we've never learned about it before. So I'm just curious, do you view your engineering background kind of as like a superpower though, in terms of the way that you approach the health space and the wellness space? Because I feel like you have a very particular way of how you view problems and problem solve and things like that.
Maybe. I mean, it's interesting because my background's in mechanical, which is like one of the more primitive engineering disciplines. But I really like to build stuff, and I like to think about how machines work. And I'm definitely, I'm maybe a little bit disturbed as somebody who likes to understand really what's going on. And I'm used to deterministic problems, meaning like, when a machine stops breaking, there's a cause, and it's deterministic. You can find it. I think maybe the thing that initially intrigued me so much about this was that it seemed like the whole health system was so comfortable not actually understanding what's going on inside the human body, and not even trying to build the tools and make them accessible to allow them to understand that. That's the thing that bothers me maybe the most. And when I look at parked outside in the parking lot, I have a 2002 Toyota Tundra, and plugged into that, I have a little Bluetooth dongle that plugs into the OBD2 port, which basically allows me to access the onboard computer. And that can tell me about 50 channels of live data about my 2002 Tundra, because there are sensors in the engine, mass airflow rate, fuel injection timing, all this stuff. That's a 2002 Toyota Tundra. That is like, over the course of the life of that vehicle, probably 10 billion times more data than I will have about my body when I die at the current rate. And that's just ridiculous. You get an Airbus A350 passenger airplane collects 2.5 terabytes of data on every flight about essentially infinite sensors that are all over that vehicle. They have strain gauges on the wings showing how much they're flexing. They have every parameter of the engine's performance. All that stuff is stored in a recorder, because it is both used to understand performance of the vehicle and to prevent an unacceptable failure, as well as to do forensics. But its main purpose is to maintain the function of that life or death aircraft. Human health is also life or death. And I just simply, like, my brain doesn't understand why we haven't approached it in that same way. Like, we should be instrumenting our bodies in the way that we instrument our machines to understand what's going on, and to prevent failure. So I think I have just that's really not how health textbooks are written. And I understand that there is quite a bit of simplification there. I'm oversimplifying the problem. I understand that. But sometimes that's what you have to do with hard problems. It's just like, what's the smallest bite? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So that's how I approach it.
Dude, that's an unbelievable mental model. I've never thought about it from that perspective before, that this truly, like, having access to these biomarkers and these data points truly is a matter of life or death. And then you imagine the things that you would be able to prevent just by having the right data, and how many people live their lives without knowing the most basic but fundamental biomarkers that actually predict whether you're going to be healthy long-term or not. It's crazy. Like, how out of every 10 Americans, like, how many of those Americans could tell you, their blood sugar levels, their heart rate, waist size, just very basic things that we know because we've put in the 10,000 hours and we've kind of needed to out of necessity. But I don't know, maybe 9 out of 10 Americans probably couldn't tell you that data, is my guess, right?
No doubt. And right now, 88% of Americans have at least one symptom of metabolic dysfunction. You got 100 million, roughly, Americans with prediabetes or diabetes. 70% of them at least will get type 2 if they don't intervene. 80% of them don't know they have it. 80% of people with prediabetes, of which there are 90 million, do not know that they are pre-diabetic. I mean, that is the most basic information about your health state. And so, absolutely 9 out of 10 people would not know. And the problem is we have this confusion about what numbers we do know actually mean. So in a world where we get one blood panel per year at most people are not getting health checkups once a year. Those that are, you get one data point, you get your blood panel at your checkup, And that gives you a number, triglycerides, 105. Your triglycerides will double after a meal. That's well known. Like the rate at which your triglycerides change is extremely dynamic.
Wow.
So you don't have a triglyceride level of 105. You had that at that moment that you got your blood checked. And we have this confusion. So like often, literally often, and I personally used to like throw numbers like that around because I thought that they were sort of immutable characteristics. Like my triglycerides are 105. And we just don't understand that these things change constantly. We are literally a wet chemistry set.
Mm-hmm.
We are putting chemicals in, and new chemicals have to be synthesized to address those chemicals, break them down, make them into new chemicals. And that's happening constantly in reaction to the sunlight, in reaction to the food that we're eating, the sleep we're getting, our current health state, on and on and on. And I think we are so confused because we've used these tools that, where the system tells you that getting your blood measured once a year is understanding your health state and understanding your triglycerides. And that is not what's happening. They are changing constantly. It looks like this, it doesn't look like this. Right. And so, belaboring the point, but I think we are actually, not only are people not connected with anything about their internal health state and the numbers that define it, but the numbers they are familiar with are like not useful.
Yeah, I don't think you're belaboring the point at all. I'm kind of blown away just thinking about the fact that you think about all the people that, the variables, the way that things can change from one day to the next with your blood work. You do one thing wrong, it pops a totally different score. And then you're going on all these medication, these prescriptions, when it's like, the future is what you're talking about, of probably like hyper personalized to the point where it's so convenient where you can actually test all the time, where you're not overly obsessed with it, but you have readings almost every single day of like how these biomarkers are changing.
Yeah. I mean, think 10 years in the future and looking back, I mean, is it likely that we're going to be able to tell the real-time health state of, okay, let me just say this. 10 years from now, for sure, I will be able to tell the real-time health state of my body unquestionably. Like it just seems obvious. Like some technology will allow me to know the state of my body in a comprehensive way instead of having to do these like discrete tests when there's a risk that I have, incurable illnesses. Like that doesn't seem like the right way. So the right way will probably happen 10 years from now. Like that's typically how we do things in life. We're like, yeah, we'll have flying cars in 10 years. The problem is like, I think we believe these things, that the future will deliver us a solution. But then in the moment, we sort of deny the assumptions that would go into believing that.
Definitely.
So if you think that, then that means that you think you can measure the things that define your health. And I agree with you. But why then are we not working on that technology? Why do people roll their eyes at the idea that we can, in real time, understand the state of the human body? I can both understand how we got here and also get really frustrated by it because it's a situation where we need to bring in different perspectives, as you said, and we need to really let loose technology to do the thing that it's supposed to do. But we should do it in a very similar way to what we do in other industries. This is not. Yeah, I mean, maybe what's happening is we need to build the foundation layer of tools that will even allow us to understand the complexity that is the human body. Because I think what I'm doing in this conversation is maybe making light of how complex the issue really is. It really is very complex and challenging. And I oftentimes, like, even with my own body, I'm pretty amazed at how little we know and how little I know for sure. So that will continue for a long time, but that doesn't mean that we should throw up our hands and say, like, only in established, health centers can we do science. I think it's actually, let's get as much information decentralized to individuals as possible so that they can at least get started on understanding what's going on, and let's improve that technology as fast as possible.
Yeah. Prior to us hitting record, you were very fondly speaking about one of your co-founders, Dr. Casey Means, who's incredible, and her brother Callie's incredible too. And you said about her that she has a warrior's mentality. And I feel like you have a warrior's mentality too. And I think that in this space with like everything that we're trying to battle against, you really do need that warrior's mentality to push you forward. And like, it's such a backwards industry in so many ways, but with that warrior's mentality, I think it gives you hope that, like, through conversations like this, we can compound and build on this thing and kind of right the direction of the ship over time.
Yeah, totally. And, my co-founder, Sam, same, like it's sort of run through brick walls team. And I think it's definitely necessary. It's such it can be an overwhelming problem. And I'm sure you experience this when you're just thinking about the scope of what you're trying to put out into the world and how many barriers there are. It can be overwhelming, but it's the little things, I think Casey does a really good job of helping people understand that this is not that complicated. There are very small and delightful rituals you can build into your life that will compound into a fundamentally different health outcome. And same with the technology we're trying to develop, and levels. And it's software. We can do a lot with software, but got to start somewhere. And it can be difficult to think about like how are we going to make the world's best biological observability platform and help all these people of various backgrounds and technology abilities improve their lives. But the fun part is just starting somewhere and then getting feedback, and that's been just incredibly gratifying, is being able to work on this with people who are as motivated about it and talk to people like yourself who are sharing that like energy, and then to have people actually use it and it work, to some extent in their lives. Pretty awesome.
Yeah. I feel like once you're able to have that mental reframe of the fact that your mission is so difficult is actually a sign that it's really meaningful. Like when you embrace that, it's like, you're in an amazing spot.
I think, yeah, right? That's a good point. Yeah. It's like, I would not want an extremely difficult mission that does not somehow feel like it intuitively must exist or should exist. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when you're getting because I know that like the day to day of what you guys are trying to do is so difficult, and you probably have that feeling of there's just no way that I can possibly accomplish everything I need to do every 24 hours. But when you get testimonials of a woman losing 80 pounds from your technology, it's like, how does that not just compel you to just want to keep running through a brick wall and spreading this message as far and as wide as possible?
It totally does.
Yeah,
it totally does.
Well, what's the best way for people to either connect with you, get access to a Levels CGM? I'm sure people are going to want to get some of that goodness on their arm. So what's the best way for them to sign up?
Yeah, well, we'd love to have people come and join Levels at levelshealth.com, this website. You can follow us at Levels on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Joshua's Forest on Twitter. I'm not super active, but I share my thoughts here and there.
Yeah.
And generally, I would also highly recommend following Casey at Dr. Casey's Kitchen on Instagram. She does some really amazing work, has a great book coming out, Good Energy, which we talked a little bit about her and her brother Callie, but really goes to the underpinnings of that systems biology, metabolic health foundation that affects every tissue, every reason that something can go wrong. Metabolic health underlies that. So I think those are the starting points. And always check out our blog, levelshealth.com/blog.
There's so much good information on there too. But brother, I appreciate it so much, man. Conversations like this are really what give us hope for the future. And I really do believe that we can pull back from the brink because of people like you and companies like Levels. So just so appreciative of everything that you're doing. Appreciate you having this conversation, and can't wait to do it again soon.
I appreciate it, man. This was awesome. And shout out to the Levels team. They're the ones doing the hard work.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.
Cool.